The blonde had a cyanide smile that I was sure had poisoned the souls of dozens of men. She used it against me as I held my pistol pointed at her face. It faltered a bit when she saw that I was immune to her sensuous toxin, and I could see the concern flash across her ice-blue eyes. It was there for the briefest second, then gone. "What are you going to do to me?" she said with a batting of her long eyelashes and a coquettish pout. "And is it gonna hurt?" Her name was Katrina Vex, Hollywood's current silver screen goddess, and I was about to put a bullet between her eyes. "You have no power over me," I said, and pulled the hammer back on my .38 revolver. "Why not?" she asked, nibbling at her lower lip. She let her fingers slide seductively down her curves. "Don't you think I'm pretty?" "You're not my type," I said, though, if I'm to be honest, this was a straight-up lie. Katrina was hot as a July centerfold. Had she not been covered in the blood of a teenage girl and she was flashing me that come-do-what-you-want-to-me look, I would have given in to my lust and drank her poison. You might be asking yourself how I got into this situation. Well, the answer requires that you accept certain things that go against modern wisdom, like the fact that Katrina Vex was one of the 13 most powerful vampires in the world. See, my name is Tiberius Poe, and I'm a private investigator who specializes in cases that involve the paranormal. I work cases that make other investigators question their sanity. This case of the blood-stained Starlet happened before I came to Nevermore Hollows. I'm telling it now as part of my memoirs because my business partner, Marlene Bloom, has told me if I don't, she will. Since it's best that these stories are told in my own voice from my own perspective, I finally gave in. So, here we are. How Marlene came to be my business partner has its own paranormal twist. Marlene walked into my office a little over a year ago on Halloween. She told me that she had met an old gypsy woman with a cracked crystal ball at a rundown diner in the Arizona desert. The old gypsy told Marlene to come to Nevermore Hollows and protect me. From what? Neither of us know. Marlene is quirky as hell and easy to look at. She has shoulder-length brown hair and big green eyes that shine a deep intelligence behind a pair of thick nerd glasses. I've come to learn that she is tough as nails. She's a quick draw and an even quicker wit, and when I watch her go about her day, I'm often reminded of a cat for some reason I can't quite explain. Anyway, not long after she began working for me, I worked a case involving a dead man that escaped the morgue and went walking about town. That case made me wealthy, and I made her a full partner. So, back to how I came to be standing with my gun leveled at Katrina Vex. Before I settled in Nevermore Hollows, I was a private investigator in Hollywood. The average person knows that Hollywood is full of some strange people, but what most people don't realize is that Hollywood is evil. The people in power are evil. The people who want to be in power are evil. And those who are innocent get devoured by both. When you hear rumors that someone has sold their soul to gain fame in Hollywood, it's probably a good idea to believe it. And yes, you can sell your soul to the devil, both metaphorically and literally. I've had to clean up the mess from both, which are surprisingly similar in the carnage they cause in someone's life. I had a low-rent office above a liquor store in North Hollywood. I was sitting at my desk making notes on a case I'd just wrapped up when Elvis Crux walked in and introduced himself. Elvis is a homicide detective that works for the Hollywood division of the LAPD. He didn't look like what you think a hardened homicide detective would look like. Instead of a rumpled suit, He wore faded jeans and a garish Hawaiian shirt patterned with pineapples and hibiscus flowers. He wasn't a grizzled old man who had let the job suck the life out of him. He was 40, looked like a health nut, and he was easy to smile.
Mr. Poe, I'm Detective Crux,
he said as I stood and shook his hand.
But you can call me Elvis.
Nice to meet you, Elvis, I said. How can I help you?
I need your help finding a missing girl. Her name is Erica Snyder.
I considered what he said. If you know the types of cases I work, I assume this isn't your normal kid goes missing case. Elvis shook his head.
It's not. I'm pretty sure she's going to be sacrificed in a satanic ritual.
I motioned for him to take a seat. I sat in my chair behind my desk. It's rare that anyone in your position ever admits to such things, I said. Folks like you either don't believe in the paranormal or are afraid to admit you do. Elvis locked eyes with mine. It was direct and intense, but a smile twitched at the corners of his mouth.
Well, I'm not like other detectives.
I waited a beat for him to elaborate. When he didn't, I said, So, why do you think this case is of a satanic nature?
Because she isn't the first that's gone missing under these particular circumstances. 2 others were found dead.
He pulled up the first of 2 crime scenes on his phone. He showed them to me.
This is how we found the bodies.
I leaned forward in my chair and winced at the pictures. That's compelling, but I'm not quite convinced. It could be staged to look satanic just to throw off the investigation. For the first time since we started the discussion, Elvis chose to look away.
Well, that's true,
he said, glancing at the bare walls.
But I know about these things, Tiberius. You see, my father and mother are both serving life sentences in prison for murdering people during satanic rituals.
He then turned his intense gaze back on me. I could see there was much more to the story, but I didn't press. He would tell me, or he wouldn't. Either way, I already trusted him. Okay, I said. Tell me everything you know so far.
Well, all 3 girls are 13 years old. The first was Jenny McPherson. We found her body splayed out on the ground in front of Marilyn Monroe's crypt at the Westwood Village Memorial Park. As you can see in the picture, she was surrounded by 13 black candles and 13 white roses. Her heart had been cut out of her chest, and her throat was sliced. We suspect it happened after midnight when the cemetery was closed. Unfortunately, no cameras were working at the time.
Even so, I replied, that's very bold.
Agreed. The second murder was of Samantha Wilkins. She was found literally lying on Jane Mansfield's grave at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, also surrounded by candles and roses. Her heart was missing, and her throat was cut as well.
I considered this evidence. So, someone is abducting young girls and sacrificing them using the graves of long-dead actresses as altars. I think the fact that all 3 girls are 13 is important.
I agree with that. Historically, that's the age that most girls are seen as becoming women.
That tracks with the black candles, I added. They symbolize transformation and rebirth, and the white roses symbolize innocence, and the cutting of their throats makes me fear someone was draining some of their blood. I trailed off, not wanting to state the obvious. I wanted to see how open to the paranormal he was. He leaned forward in his chair and locked his eyes on mine.
I thought the same thing. This is vampiric behavior. And not the sensationalized Hollywood version of what a vampire is. This is the real deal.
I was impressed. Most people don't realize that there are different kinds of vampires. The average person tends to think vampires walk about only at night biting people's necks. And this is true if the vampire is recently turned or not very old. But the truly scary vampires are more ritualistic. They often slice their victims' throats or major arteries, letting them bleed out into some sort of sacrificial container, then drink the blood that way. You seem to know your vampire lore, I said. Elvis gave a disgusted grunt.
Huh. Trust me, I wish I didn't. The fact that this one is leaving bodies out in public worries me. It's too bold. Too desperate.
I was thinking the same thing. And now that I had all this information, it was time to ask the most important question. Do you think Erica is still alive? Without hesitation, Elvis said.
I do. But I think we're running out of time. The other 2 girls were abducted the day before their 13th birthday, and they were murdered sometime after midnight on the morning of their birthday. Erica was abducted an hour ago. It's 3 o'clock now, which means she turns 13 in 9 hours.
There was no way I was going to sit by and do nothing when this little girl could be saved. I'm in, I said. Elvis gave a thankful nod.
I'll email you everything I have on this, including the crime scene photos. Right now I'm on my way to speak to Erica's family to see if they can shed any light on this abduction. I'll let you know what I find, and when I'm done, I'll call you and we can meet up.
We stood and shook hands. He left, and I took a few moments to consider where to start. I decided to go to the scene of the first murder, Marilyn Monroe's crypt. I grabbed my phone and my .38 and headed out. It was late afternoon, and the California sun was painting everything in a life-affirming glow, which I knew to be only a facade that hid the death rot of Hollywood. I drove my '72 K5 Blazer to the Westwood Village Memorial Park. It took 45 minutes via the 405. I parked and made my way to the pavilion that houses Marilyn Monroe's remains. Her crypt was set into a wall along with a couple dozen others, each with their own bronze plaque that gave the name and dates of birth and death of those who were interred. The evidence had been removed, but I like to visit the scene anyway, to feel the energy, to try and put myself into the mind of the monster. This helps when asking questions like who, what, when, and why. Elvis had sent the pics of the crime scene, and I pulled them up on my phone. Jenny McPherson lay on her back, her head positioned directly under Marilyn's plaque. The black candles were placed around her in a wide circle with white roses between them. There was a gaping hole in her chest, and her throat had been cleanly sliced. I spent a few more minutes there looking for anything the crime techs may have missed. When I found nothing, I left and headed to the second crime scene. Jane Mansfield was buried at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, which was back across town. It took me almost an hour because the traffic had gotten bad, but eventually I stood over her grave and compared the crime scene photos. Samantha Wilkins was laid on top of the grave, her head just a few inches away from the white headstone, which was in the shape of a large Valentine heart. Same kind of candles and roses. To folks who don't have an analytical mind, it would seem like I had wasted precious time coming to these two crime scenes. But I had gathered a surprising amount of information, enough to make some logical deductions. Elvis was correct in his assessment. These murders were truly satanic. And understanding the occult like I did, I knew that these murders were part of a youth ritual. Say you were someone who didn't want to grow old. If you knew the right incantations and the right rituals and you were wicked enough to murder a child, you could use their blood to stave off the effects of aging. You could remain youthful and full of vitality for hundreds, if not thousands of years. This led me to believe the killer was a woman. Sure, there are evil men who perform youth rituals, but since these girls were being sacrificed at the graves of famous actresses, who were arguably the most beautiful women in Hollywood when they were at the height of their fame, I was confident we were dealing with an actress. My gut told me it was an actress who was already famous, but who was aging and afraid of losing her status as a youthful beauty queen. These leaps of logic would help me narrow down my list of suspects. I walked across the cemetery until I found a marble bench in the shade of a massive pepper tree and took a seat. The sun was sinking low, twilight was approaching fast. I did a search on my phone, looking for any kind of scandal involving an aging actress. And man, that was a longer list than I imagined. It took me a while, but I finally found what I was looking for. Katrina Vex had landed her first major role at 20. For 15 years, she had been the it girl with a run of successful rom-com movies. She also had been the lead in a franchise where she played what was essentially a sexy female spy a la Mission Impossible. But last year, she was replaced in the third movie of that franchise by a younger actress. This caused her to have a meltdown where she set fire to a movie set, then crashed her Bentley after washing down a couple Valiums with a bottle of wine. After that, Katrina had taken leave from Hollywood for almost a year. She returned 3 months ago, a few days before the first murder, looking as good as she ever had. In fact, she looked younger than she did before she left. Word on the street was that she recently signed a 3-movie deal, which meant her career had been resurrected from the grave. Now, all this supported my hypothesis, but it was much too circumstantial. I needed more. In the age of oversharing personal information, especially with the narcissistic Hollywood glitterati, this was easier to do than you'd think. I simply went to her social media pages and began scrolling. It had gotten full-on dark, and the moon was rising above the cemetery when I found what I was looking for. There were literally hundreds of pics of Katrina where I could see that prior to her sabbatical from Hollywood, she had no exposed tattoos. But when she came back to Hollywood, she had one on her left wrist. You could clearly see it in pictures where she was waving to her fans. And I knew this tattoo, and it scared me. This tattoo was from a cult that I had heard plenty about but had never encountered, which was fine by me because it was a very satanic, very dangerous cult. It was the Apostles of Judas. The lore on this cult goes like this. The very night Judas betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, he took to himself 13 apostles. They performed a perversion of the Last Supper where they summoned Satan, who appeared to them in the form of Baphomet, the androgynous half-human, half-goat beast, and served them pieces of his own flesh and goblets of his own blood. It was believed that on that night, these 13 evil apostles became the first vampires. The apostles of Judas are literally the top of the pyramid of satanic cults. Nobody knows for sure, but it was rumored to still have only 13 members. If that is true, then theoretically, the only way you could become one of the 13 was to kill one of the members and take their place. If I was right, and Katrina Vex was now one of the apostles of Judas, then she had somehow defeated a vampire that was hundreds, if not thousands, of years old, and that meant she was now likely herself a vampire. I had to be careful, or I'd end up dead, or worse. I stood and glanced out over the cemetery. The moonlight frosted the headstones and made the path glitter as if sprinkled with fairy dust. It looked serene, beautiful even. But this was a place for the dead, and I was of the living. So I walked back to my blazer and drove around while I considered my next move. Around midnight, I found myself driving into the Hollywood Hills, past mansions worth millions of dollars. I realized I was headed to Katrina Vex's mansion. I was doing what I always seem to do when I'm working a case. I was winging it, flying by the seat of my pants, following the evidence where it led me and ready to bring down the bad guy or monster, which in my line of work, those terms are often interchangeable. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an idiot. I'm no lethal weapon type of guy with a death wish. But when it becomes clear to me that it is time to act and save an innocent life, I act. I called Elvis, gave him a quick rundown of what I'd learned, and told him to meet me there.
"Well, wait for me,"
he said. I glanced at my watch. "I can't," I replied. "If I'm right about this, Katrina is keeping Erica in her mansion. Because of there being so many dead actresses buried around Los Angeles, we don't know where she will commit the next sacrifice. I need to get to the mansion before she leaves with the girl."
"What makes you think Katrina and Erica are still there?"
Elvis asked. I could hear the skepticism in his voice.
"It's already midnight. She might be on the move."
"Katrina has been bold by doing these sacrifices at the cemeteries," I said. "But she isn't stupid. She won't risk exposing herself by arriving too early. If you know what you're doing, these types of rituals don't have to be drawn out. They can be quick and dirty. From her mansion, she can get to any number of cemeteries within 45 minutes. My gut tells me she's still there."
"I don't like it, Tiberius. You're making some desperate assumptions, and there's no judge in this hellhole who'll give me a warrant to get inside Katrina's mansion. They're all paid to look the other way in situations like this."
"That's why you came to me," I replied. "You knew we'd end up in a situation like this, so I'm going with or without you. Be there or don't, but I'm going to save that girl." I hung up, and 10 minutes later, I parked at the entrance of the winding lane that led to Katrina's mansion. On my phone, I had pulled up one of those navigation apps that also gives satellite images. I was able to pull up a view of Katrina's property to see that the lane continued for about 100 yards, then ended at a massive gate. Staying in the shadows, I made my way to the gate. There was a guard shack which was empty, and I could see 2 cameras, both pointed toward the paved lane. As part of my job, I'd become familiar with various security systems. I knew this brand. These cameras came with a red light near the lens that indicated it was powered up. The lights were dark. These cameras had been turned off. Your normal Hollywood bodyguards and security personnel see a lot of terrible things. They're required to sign non-disclosure agreements and are handsomely compensated to keep their mouths shut. However, I was betting that human sacrifice was something beyond the pale, and that Katrina had sent the guards home and turned off the security cameras so that there would be no evidence that she had Erica on the property. I crept close enough to see beyond the gate. 50 yards away stood the mansion, all modern angles and glass. Out front was parked a black Mercedes SUV. That would be how she transported Erica. When Katrina decided to move, she would move quickly, so it made sense that Erica was being kept in a downstairs room that was close to the front door. I considered my next move. If I was correct and she sent security away for the night, then she likely would have sent the rest of her staff away as well. Of course, I couldn't rule out that there was at least one person she kept in her inner circle whom she trusted enough to help her. So I needed to proceed as if she wasn't alone. Just then, from behind me, something big gave a low, guttural growl. I turned, and my blood ran cold. A dog man stood 20 feet away. It wasn't very tall, only about 5 feet 5, but it was basically a walking slab of canine muscle on a man-shaped frame, topped off with a snout full of thick, sharp teeth. It had muscular He-Man arms and hands. Its legs were thick and powerful. It was covered in short black hair that glistened in the moonlight. Damn it. I should have known that an apostle of Judas would use paranormal beings for security instead of humans. If you don't know, dogmen come in all kinds of breeds. They range from pit bull to Doberman. The one that stood before me appeared to have the traits of a Rottweiler. I prayed that this was the only one. It spoke, which I had heard dogmen could do, but I was still in shock.
What are you doing here?
I think you know, I said. I'm going to save that girl. I reached for my .38, but faster than I could have imagined for something so massive, the dogman shot toward me, slammed into my stomach like a linebacker taking down an unguarded quarterback. We hit the ground hard. My gun was knocked away from me. It slid to the center of the lane. I snatched a razor-sharp knife from a sheath I keep at my belt and repeatedly stabbed the beast, driving the blade deep. I felt it sink in, at times nicking the bone. We rolled a couple of times and ended with me on my back and the beast sitting astride me. I was covered in its blood, though it didn't seem to notice the dozen wounds I'd given it. It swiped at my hand, knocking the knife out of my grip. Then it leaned down, preparing to tear out my throat with its teeth, when suddenly I heard loud crackling. Still astride me, the dogman straightened and glanced over its shoulder with an angry, annoyed growl. Then I heard what sounded like 2 wheezing coughs, and chunks of the dogman's head disintegrated in a bloody spray. It fell off me and rolled onto its back. I sat up and saw Elvis standing a few feet away. He was still in that garish Hawaiian shirt, but in his left hand he had a taser. In his right hand he held his .45, which he had fitted with a suppressor. That explained the crackling and the wheezing sounds. He had tased the beast, then when it reared up enough that he could get a clear shot, he'd put 2 rounds into its head. I stood, wiping at the blood that had sprayed on me. It wasn't much, but I still didn't like it on my hands and face. "Thank you," I said. I noticed that Elvis didn't seem to be shocked at seeing the beast.
You're welcome. I wasn't sure what to expect when I got here, so I loaded my gun with silver bullets.
I was impressed. You seem to know more about the paranormal than just witches and vampires, I said. He shrugged.
I told you. My parents were high-ranking Satanists. I've seen some things.
Well, your timing is perfect, I said as I retrieved my gun and my knife. Elvis nodded.
Do you think there are more of these things roaming the property?
I took a beat to consider. I don't think so, I said. Dogmen are unpredictable and untrainable and tend to fight each other for dominance. I'm shocked Katrina had this one in her service. Besides, a single dogman would be able to take down multiple people, even if they were well armed with conventional weapons. But clearly, your foresight in using silver bullets was fortuitous. What else do you have up your sleeve? He reached into his jeans pocket and brought out a small vial filled with clear liquid.
Holy water. And I have a cross on a chain around my neck. I know, cliche, but it works. So what else should we expect?
My assessment is that she needs an extra set of hands, I said. I'm going to bet she has at least one person assisting her, but I don't think more than two. I don't have a clue if her help would have any paranormal traits. Elvis looked beyond the gate to the mansion. There were no outdoor or indoor lights that we could see. He gave a sly smile and quoted a lyric originally sung by his namesake.
Okay, then. A little less conversation, a little more action, please.
I stepped into the guard shack and hit the button that opened the gate. Elvis and I quickly made our way up the driveway, staying low and trying to use the Mercedes as a shield. The SUV's windows were blacked out. I was sure if anyone was inside, they would have gotten out and attacked us already. But, just to be sure, I pulled the handle on the rear door on the driver's side. It was unlocked. A quick glance inside showed it was empty. We crept up to the entrance of the dark mansion. Elvis stood to the left of the front door, and I stood on the right. I peeked through the window. A faint glow came from behind a door just beyond the foyer. That had to be where Katrina was keeping Erica. Elvis tried the door. It was unlocked. He pushed it open, and we went in low. There was a stairway to our left that led up to the next level. It was dark up there. There was a massive room to my right, also dark. There was no time to clear any of the rooms, but we took a beat to listen. Just then, we heard crying coming from the room with the light. We crept forward. As we got closer, we could hear Erica pleading, "Please, let me go. I promise I won't tell anyone about this. Just let me go. Please, please." In a throaty, sensual voice, Katrina replied, "Now, why would I want to do that? I need your blood." Erica's pleading devolved into heavy sobs. "No," she mumbled. "Please, no." "Here's how it's going to go down, kitten," Katrina said. "Even though it's after midnight, I can't conduct the full ritual at the graveside. The risk of being caught is too great. So, Demetrius here is going to draw some of your blood from your arm so that I can get the less important parts of it out of the way. Then we're going to load you up and take you to the grave of Rita Hayworth. There, I'm going to sacrifice you to Satan so that I can stay beautiful forever." From this exchange, it was clear there was at least one other person in the room. We still did not know if Demetrius was fully human or not. Erica cried out in pain. "Ow! That hurt!" Elvis moved forward, ready to bash through the door. I grabbed his arm and shook my head. He grimaced, but he understood. We simply did not know who else was in the room. If we waited until they came out, we would have the same advantage of surprise, but with the bonus of knowing if there was anyone else. Elvis stepped further back into the shadows, just to the left of the door. Across from us was another darkened room. I shot across the hall and inside. I positioned myself so that I was hidden but could also see the door. We heard Katrina say, "That will be enough, Demetrius." A few long heartbeats later, Demetrius opened the door in preparation for moving Erica. He didn't step into the hallway, but I could see him. He looked like your normal high-priced bodyguard. He was thick with muscle, wore a black suit, white shirt, black tie. He had hard eyes, a square jaw, and a combat soldier's grimace. That didn't mean he was not some sort of monster, like a shapeshifter or had some other paranormal powers. I doubted it, but you never know. I wanted to move, to rush in, to save the girl now, but I had to be sure there were no other bodyguards. I could see inside the room, which was lit with candles, but I couldn't see in the blind spots on each side of the door. Erica was sitting in a chair, her wrists zip-tied to the armrests. She was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. There was a small Band-Aid affixed to the crook of her left arm where Demetrius had drawn the blood. Katrina stood over her, wearing only a crimson silk robe, holding a small golden goblet. It was filled with Erica's blood. Katrina took a sip and let out a delighted groan. "The fear in your blood has such a kick. This by no means will be as effective as when I slit your throat and cover myself in it. That's when the real magic happens." Katrina began to chant in a serpentine and arcane language as she loosened her robe, revealing her Playboy centerfold curves. She dipped 3 fingers of her left hand inside the goblet, then used her bloody fingers to draw an upside-down cross on her abdomen. Another dip of the fingers, and she smeared the girl's blood on her face and neck. Finally, Demetrius stepped out into the hallway. I nodded at Elvis, who squeezed off a shot. The gun gave that wheezing cough, and the bullet hit the big man in his right temple. Demetrius dropped to the floor and didn't get up. Thankfully, he was human. I ran across the hallway into the candlelit room, and that is how I came to have my gun leveled at one of the most beautiful movie stars in Hollywood. I saw hope wash over Erica's tear-stained face. "Help me! She's trying to kill me!" I noticed that Elvis had not followed me into the room. I trusted he was making sure that Demetrius stayed dead and that nobody crept up on us, in case there were others in the mansion. "I know, sweetie," I said. "Just hang in there. I'm going to get you home to your parents." Katrina flashed her brilliant smile. With all the blood, it came across as feral, insane. And after our brief exchange of not-so-pleasantries I laid out at the beginning of this story, she said, "Do you even know what I am?" I nodded. "It looks like you're batshit crazy and full of evil," I said. She gave a low, throaty laugh that under less horrific circumstances would have been erotic. "Oh, I am going to tear you apart." And then she did something that I'd heard the apostles of Judas could do but had never seen done. She transformed. And it happened so fast that it was almost instantaneous. Her whole body seemed to blur for a heartbeat. Then, what stood before me was a beast. Her body retained every seductive line and curve that made her a woman, but her feet ended in thick black hooves. Her hands still had fingers, but they were tipped with long, pointy nails. But as disturbing as that was, it was her head that caused my breath to catch in my chest. It was that of a goat, with long, upturned horns. Her ice-blue eyes had morphed into glossy black orbs, and the lips pulled back from her snout to reveal two needle-sharp vampire fangs. Erica screamed. I squeezed the trigger of my .38. The bullet slammed into Katrina's chest, center mass, just like I'd been taught. She stumbled back a step, then looked down at the holes that oozed crimson blood. She reared back her head and gave that throaty laugh, but this time it was infected with a deep, goat-like bleating. It was nightmarish. She charged at me. I heard Elvis yell from behind me to get down. I dropped and rolled. Elvis stood in the doorway and fired off a round. It hit her between her ample, fur-covered breasts, and the hole that the silver bullet left began to sizzle. Katrina screamed in pain and jumped over me with her fangs bared, ready to rip out Elvis's throat. He fired another round. It hit her in the neck. Blood sprayed onto the wall and the floor. The smell of gunpowder and burning flesh filled the room. She slammed into Elvis before he could get the headshot he was aiming for. They slid out into the hallway. Elvis dropped his gun. It rattled to the floor beside me. I snatched it and ran out of the room behind them. Elvis was on his hands and knees, trying to crawl away from the Katrina beast. She scrambled on all fours behind him, smearing her blood across the white marble floor. She grabbed his left ankle and yanked him back. He rolled onto his bottom, snatched the crucifix from his neck and held it up. She snarled in rage, but shrank back, letting go of him. Elvis surprised me when he shot forward, grabbed one of her horns in his left hand, and pushed the crucifix against her forehead, right between her eyes. It seared into her flesh with a sizzle. She raked her claws across the arm Elvis was using to hold her horn, slicing deeply into the flesh. He grunted in pain and let go. I raised his gun and pulled the trigger, but it jammed. Katrina was a blood-covered horror. She pushed herself up, screamed in rage, and ran down the hallway. I got the jam cleared and fired 2 shots, hitting her in the back of the head. She dropped in a heap at the doorway. I ran over to Elvis, but he had already taken off his pineapple and hibiscus-patterned Hawaiian shirt and wrapped it around his wrist. I noticed that he had old, ragged scars on his chest, stomach, and back. They looked as if they were made by claws and teeth. Clearly, there was more to Elvis that I needed to know. He waved me off.
I'm okay. Just take care of Erica.
I glanced at Katrina's lifeless body, then ran into the room and cut Erica loose. She jumped from her chair and wrapped me in a hug, clinging to me, sobbing. I assured her that all was going to be okay, that she was now safe. Elvis pushed himself up, his shirt dripping with blood.
She good?
I nodded. Yeah, but you're going to need medical attention. I'll call for an ambulance.
No. I'll do that in a few minutes. First, we need to get you out of here.
I gave him a confused look. What do you mean?
There's a protocol in Hollywood that I need to follow. We both know that this town is evil. Those in power surely know Katrina is a vampire, and my superiors are going to want to make sure they control the narrative here.
We aren't going to let Katrina get away with this, I said defiantly. People need to know she killed those other girls and was going to do the same to Erica.
It'll never happen, Tiberius. The powerful people that rule this town will never let truth be told. But there's nothing we can do about it. Trust me.
So there will be no justice for the other two murdered girls, Jenny and Samantha? I asked. Elvis had a sad look on his face. He shook his head.
Unfortunately, no. Those murders will go down as unsolved. But there is some hope. The rulers of this town will pay them to keep their mouths shut. It's less messy than killing her.
I thought about this for a moment. That sucks, I said.
Yeah, I know.
I get what you do here, I said. You're trying to work within the system to stop things like this from happening.
Yeah. Being a detective gives me access to all the crimes that happen in this godforsaken place. So I can determine which ones are perpetrated by paranormal beings. Then, I track the evil bastards down and I kill them.
We stepped out into the hallway and stopped cold. Katrina's body was gone.
She shouldn't have survived that.
I winced. Damn it. I should have known better. With all the chaos, I forgot the lore concerning the apostles of Judas. To make sure they stay dead, you got to cut off their heads. Erica still clung to me. I kept an arm around her shoulders. She began to cry again. Is she going to come back and get me?
Katrina knows she stepped over the line, made some very powerful people very upset.
Elvis replied.
They will be looking for her. I bet right now she's gone to ground. By morning, she will have left California.
I'm going to track her down and kill her, I said.
I suspect you will. It's probably safe for you to hike back to your blazer. Leave Erica with me. I'll give you 10 minutes, then I'll call this in, and I'll get her back to her parents.
Erica finally let go of me, but she still needed the strength and comfort of someone she could trust. She ran over to Elvis and wrapped him in a hug. She looked back at me. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. You're welcome, I said. I looked at Elvis. I hope we can work together again someday. He nodded.
Count on it.
I left the mansion, hiked back down to my blazer, and began my search for Katrina. That's how I ended up in Nevermore Hollows. I tracked her here before I lost her trail. I believe that Nevermore is one of the places in the world where the veil between the material world and the spiritual world is its thinnest, which makes it easy for paranormal beings to hide. I know she's here, in this creepy little town. I will find her, and I will kill her.